Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Aviation Summit. My name is Kent Lane. I'm the Business Programs Engagement Administrator with the Division of Business Relations and Equal Opportunity Department. And it's so great to be able to have everyone attend this special session that we've collaborated with on aviation with the summit. One of the things I kind of want to discuss real quick is that yesterday you engaged in quite a few different types of sessions. In those sessions, it went from certification to working with the city of Phoenix in the aviation department and project opportunities. So it was a great day to have different types of sessions and educational different types of things that would help you as a small business in the aviation department. So a couple of things. Today, I wanted to actually thank Amanda Mcginnis from the Arizona AGC chapter and be able to help get this thing rolling. It's been a very good success in previous different formats with ADOT. And I can't thank Amanda enough to be able to provide this type of information that would help subcontractors be more competitive within the industry. I'd also like to thank Sarah Morato, who's a small business program manager in Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Thank you for allowing us to be able to bring a special flavor to this event. Also like to thank Donald Mays and Don Logan for their opportunity to be able to provide information in this session, because I think this will bring a lot of value to a lot of contractors. I do want to touch up on one thing for everyone to be on the lookout for is a communication from our office, and we are going to be collaborating with the US DOT Small Business Transportation Resource Center. They have a program for helping small businesses become bonded or expand upon bonding. They have a bonding education program that helps in education and providing technical assistance on a one-on-one piece to help you expand your bonding capacity or get bonding, and also access to capital. As we know over the course of the years that's been something or somewhat of a challenge for small businesses to be more competitive within this industry. So please be on the lookout for that. That's coming here this summer. And it's a 2-hour session and they're 5 weeks. So please be aware that that's coming up here pretty soon. And with that, at this time, I'd like to introduce Amanda Mcginnis, the Vice President of the Arizona AGC chapter, and she's about to bring something enormous to you all. Amanda?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Kent, for that introduction. I want to thank the City of Phoenix Aviation Department and all the other departments that we, the Arizona Chapter Associated General Contractors, work within for procuring their work and then building their work. We've built work across Arizona since 1934. We are the oldest construction trade association in Arizona. Many of the associations that you now see or join are kind of side pieces to the original starting point, which was the AGC. You know, today we're here to help you all have prime contractors provide information to subcontractors on how to solicit the work, how to bid the work, how to get that work, and then how to perform that work. If you were listening yesterday into the summit session, and there were some great sessions yesterday, I had the privilege of looking at some of the PowerPoints, and which provided some of the information we're going to have today. And both Candace Huff and Candy Kowalski gave you some great tips on how to prepare and start yourself when it comes to bidding for the city's work. Now, some of those tips may be repeated again today or throughout our webinar, but mainly it would be just to reinforce the importance of your success. And that is what we're here today, is to ensure that you are successful in bidding city work or bidding to our prime contractors. So on behalf of AGC, we're here to help you with that and help you figure out how to stand out with a prime. I'd like to start with my esteemed panel today. I am privileged to have 4 industry professionals with over 85 years of experience in aviation construction. That's quite a lot, folks. I'm going to start with Rosemary Middleton, my friend. Rosemary is the coordinator of supplier diversity for Hensel Phelps Western District. She has been involved in the industry for many years. She has 35 years in construction and 14 with Hensel Phelps. Rosemary develops subcontractor plans, works on project goals, and assists small firms in successfully preparing to contract with Hensel by assessing their capabilities and expectations. Welcome, Rosemary. Next, I have Eric Rottner from J. Baneke Construction. Eric is an ASU grad in construction management. He is a veteran, so Eric, thank you for your service. He has worked at Baneke for over 15 years and has overseen over $330 million worth of aviation projects. He'll have a lot to share with us today. Our next two presenters are from Kiewit Infrastructure West. One of them I've known for a long time, Terry Cole. Terry is the senior manager for Kiewit Southwest District. Terry has over 41 years of experience and has worked on over 20 projects in aviation across the nation, totaling over $400 million worth of work. He has also over 15 projects under his belt at Sky Harbor. His partner in crime is Jeremy Hvac. Jeremiah has 15 years of experience, and he has managed over $164 million in Sky Harbor projects, over $264 million in alternative project delivery, something we'll talk about, you heard yesterday, and we'll talk about again today. And he currently has the oversight over the aviation and the Department of Transportation projects in Arizona. What a great group we have, and I want to thank you all for taking your time to help us communicate the information to the subcontractors and small businesses that are on today. So let's get started. First, I'd like to start with just some basics, and these would apply across the board no matter whether you're doing a city job or a county job or a DOT job, and that is, do you have a contractor's license? In Arizona, you must have a contractor's license in order to perform construction work. The registrar of contractors is right across the street from our office, and they are more than happy to provide you with a packet of information that will get you started on that. Do you have bonding? Are you able to get insurance and bond? Do you have all your certifications? Do you have your traffic control certifications if you're in flagging and traffic control? Do you have lab techs? Do your lab techs have certifications for quality assurance and quality control? Inspectors, do you have all your certificates? Recently, something just came up with truck certifications and equipment. There is such a need right now for taking material from the supplier over to a project that new parties, third-party trucks, have come into transporting like concrete mix to projects. Well, unfortunately, they were not certified, so they were rejected at projects. That's very important. You must have all your certifications before you start to go and solicit work for our prime contractors, or then doing your work on your own. Do you understand the different procurement methods? Again, we talked about that they talked about that yesterday, and we're going to talk about it more today. You know what a hard bid / they call design bid build is. Do you know those words, alternative project delivery methods, which is job order contractor, construction manager at risk, design build builder, or public-private partnership, P3s? Do you understand the funding mechanisms that come with each one of those? Each one of them may have a certain different type of funding mechanism, which then has different types of requirements that you will be expected under the general contractor to perform as well. How you pay your employees then will be impacted by that. You don't just get on a Davis-Bacon wage job to pay your employees what you normally had been paying them on maybe a private job. How you report all that information will be very important as we move along. So again, these are just some of the very basics that I'm starting to introduce you with, but I'm going to start with Eric. Why don't you give me one of your basics from Baneke? And you guys should probably, unless we can, I would just keep everybody unmuted because it's going to be a dialogue.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so primarily the things we look at are, qualifications, competitive bid, the experience and the project understanding from our subs. And we check for things depending on the delivery method. We may provide a pre-qualified form that has to be filled out if it's a CMAR or a JOC. On a hard bid project, we send out our RFQ, and when we get it back from everybody, we like to compare basically their inclusions, exclusions, things like that to make sure everybody's apples to apples.
Great. Okay, Jeremiah, what about you?
Yeah, no, I'd just pile on what Eric was saying there. I think a really important thing for me when we're awarding work is really looking to make sure everybody has a complete scope. So really the more detail that can be put into a quote and really outlining how the work was looked at and the different elements and how that was approached and priced helps us make an educated decision and an assessment of that quote to make sure that meets the project needs, whether that's schedule, sequence, or phasing. All those types of things are important. So just providing a quote in the sense of a monetary or the dollar amount a lot of times isn't enough story, which will make us go into kind of dig into more detail. So the more detail that can be provided in a quote scenario, it certainly helps us evaluate those and make sure that it's complete.
Rosemary, speaking on those lines as far as the basic information, and you help these folks assess their capabilities, and what are some of the things that you may see that even become like a challenge to them when they're just starting out and want to bid your work with Hensel as a basic that maybe they totally forget about or leave off?
Well, we're very interested in their EMR rating, their safety record, and past projects, the scope of work they've performed before. We're very aware that when we're working with a small business, we don't want to capitalize on taking all of their staff and all of their other opportunities off the table. So we want to make sure that they're bidding scope of work that they're prepared to complete without damaging any of their other projects. So that's a lot of conversation, two-way conversation that our team is really interested in having.
So communication is big between the proposed subcontractor and the prime contractor. And that involves even questioning about their knowledge of specifications, correct? Or again, back to the scope, all the way down to the detail of includes and excludes. Terry, what do you think about some of that?
Sure. No, I think one of the things we have a tendency a lot is, when you work out at the airport, specifically on a job that we call airside inside the AOA, is the insurance requirements. It's not like a typical highway job. Anything airside out Sky Harbor, you're going to be required to provide $5 million insurance on your commercial general liability. And you're also going to have to provide $5 million on your automobile liability. And that's something a lot of our subs aren't used to seeing on a highway job or what they typically would go out and bid. So it's something all of our subcontractors need to be aware of.
That's a great point. I was looking yesterday through the breakdown of some of the upcoming projects, and a lot of them look like they are CMARs. Eric, can you give me some expectations of the subcontractor when it comes to a CMAR, and also some items that you need to remind them about when it comes to bidding CMAR work to you as a general contractor?
Yeah, so typically, like I said, especially for airside, badging. Badging is a big discussion we typically have with the subs. And so typically on a CMAR, when we're putting it out, we send out our RFQ, and we like to send out a schedule and a scope of work. That way all subs bid it the same, essentially. They have to provide their own takeoff, give us feedback on that if they see any differences. And then, like I said, typically our big discussions, as Terry mentioned, insurance requirements, badging, both for the cost that they need to have in there and the time to get their employees badged. It's quite a process to get that authorized signer in there, and then from the authorized signer, then they have to get all their employees badged, and all their employees have to be able to get badged. The tests are only offered in English, so it can be a struggle to find folks who can fit those bills.
So let's talk back to scheduling then on that. How important, Jeremiah, is it for a subcontractor to understand their schedule, their work commitments, either with this project if they sign on, and or what what your expectations would be on a regular job and also on the aviation job? I mean, we are talking aviation today, but give a scale kind of those expectations if you have a chance.
Yeah, no, I just back to a lot of the CMAR work and has been a lot of my career, but a lot of the CMAR work, it's the sub selection is based off of the best value analysis of the sub. So a lot of times what we do was we'll put out an RFQ that has a lot of detailed information, whether it's the badging, airside work, insurance limits, but also addressing schedule. So schedule certainly is a big component, and a lot of times what we have done on more critical scopes of work is we'll have that as a part of the response in the RFQ to provide your scheduled duration, so that we can really validate our schedules and making sure that the overall job schedule still works, and how that fits in. But also is that is an opportunity for firms to differentiate themselves if it's a schedule critical item that we can assess value to the speed. So that doesn't always apply, certainly, but I think, yeah, schedule is an important thing to communicate if there's an expectation, and validating the schedules that we put out from an overall duration standpoint is kind of critical to our success. So as a sub, making sure that you fit into that and are communicating, again, how you see the work, I think is just to kind of hit that theme again. Really important for us to understand how you're looking at the work, how, duration of time, and so that we can, again, mesh it up with how we're managing the project as a whole and make sure there's no gap there.
Rosemary, oftentimes I've seen on some projects where folks have their includes and excludes, or they assume that that they were excluding certain types of the scope of the work. How do you all manage that and communicate that through to the subcontractors?
I do think Jeremiah spoke about that a little bit, but we encourage early communication in the bidding process to speak to an estimator. There's going to probably be one estimator that's handling that particular scope of work that you can develop a relationship. They'll ask questions, and at Hensel Phelps, they'll ask specific questions and try not to make any assumptions. But I think it's important for a small business to not get stuck in the middle of that and be very clear also, to look at all of the scope and be very clear on what they're including. And if there's a connection somewhere, they're identifying that it's theirs or not. So I just, specificity and clarifications are important, and you can do it verbally with the estimator and help develop that relationship.
And it's important, I would say, that even on bid day, like on hard bids, that you're available in case there are questions that arise, the things that may come up.
Yeah,
make sure yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. You're probably asking somebody else.
No, go ahead. I was just.
I do think that they'd rather have that communication early as possible, but they should be available on bid day if a question comes up from another scope from another bidder that they hadn't identified in the past.
So let's say it's an alternative project delivery, like a CMAR design build. How quickly do you notify your subs that they might be part of your team? Eric, you want to start with that answer for Banachke?
Yeah, on alternative deliveries, we typically let our subs know at the time that we're submitting our GMP. And then on our hard bid projects, obviously, who we use on bid day is who we submit.
Right, but let's go back then. But explain how long that may take before you develop a GMP, before you would notify some of those folks, because some folks might not understand that expectation.
Yeah, so typically we like to let people know the process of, especially in our GMPs, hey, we're asking for pricing here. If it's developed, if we're talking basically conceptual budgets, we get our subs in and they start working with us. We'll let them know every step of the way, hey, this is a 30%, 60, 90, hey, here we're submitting. And usually we'll let them know if they were the competitive, most qualified, and the had the best experience in project understanding and qualifications, and they are the best value, we'll let them know as soon as we prepare that GMP number. And we also let them know that once we get turnaround from the city, we'll be sending the subcontract. But we typically communicate with them that this may be a somewhat of a usually multiple week process before we actually get the GMP finally put together and submitted.
So they have a clear understanding that just because you turned in your SOQ on March 1st doesn't mean that on March 1st you're going to know what happened or that you got the contract, right? So
yes, or
right.
Sorry, or even that the city has approved our GMP. So we let them know that, hey, this is our GMP, we're going in with you, and now we're waiting for the city to get back with us to make sure that they've approved it and bought off on everything.
As you're working through all the documentation that is required, let's say for them to start work and everything, of course, payroll reporting, payments, all of those types of things come to mind. Terry, walk us through some of those expectations some of the things that you as a contractor are required to do for the sub, and then the expectations for the sub that the general has.
No, there's a lot that goes into that, especially if you're out on a federally funded project out of Sky Harbor, which a lot of the horizontal work out on an airfield requires. And because of that, we have a kind of a process internally. We have certain individuals that we make the subcontractor get in contact with, and we set up individual meetings. So we want to make sure the sub's comfortable and has an understanding of what is that requirement. Because there's a lot of them, as you mentioned, a few, certified payroll, LCP tracker, insurance, the B2G. There's just a lot of things that go into this. And we understand a lot of these subs are new to this process. So it's best if we can get them in a room, walk through that, what's required, when it's required, who you're going to submit it to, and the whole process, because it can be complicated. It can get mind-boggling, but we try to make this process as easy as we can, because we understand, we have subcontractors out there that do $1 million a year up to $100 million a year, and there's all shapes and sizes. So we want to make sure and cater to these individuals and companies to make this process as easy as we can.
Great answer. Great answer. And I would guess that City of Phoenix and Aviation all have, from time to time, and Kent would probably verify this at the end, opportunities for those of you that don't know how to prepare that documentation, and that there are training sessions where you can learn how to prepare that documentation appropriately. And sometimes your prime will help you with that as well. But the more that you can make yourself marketable by understanding those elements and being prepared for those elements, just makes you stand out to these primes that are looking for folks to work on their jobs. I'd like to talk now. Let's go into, again, some more aviation specifics. I don't know if the folks that are interested in doing that work realize the type of requirements in workmanship and performance, and even the potential sanctions that are out there if you do not deliver on time as the general contractor. Rosemary, you've been out there a while at, with Hensel Phelps at Sky Harbor. Why don't you explain some of that?
I think a really big difference is you are not in some remote area that doesn't have a lot of visitors from all different departments. City of Phoenix Aviation Department has several facets, and people that are overseeing them. Kent and Sarah's office has people come out to visit to check their work and see if they're on site. We recommend that when we're having our meetings for preparing for the project, which there's a lot, they're attended by the supervisors that will be out on the job. So they'll have a good idea of what to expect and how to proceed with communicating with their team while they're on site. I think that one of the biggest differences is how complex and how many things are going on as compared to a very busy highway, but still people are passing by and not stopping as much, I think.
Great. Jeremiah, you have anything else to add to that too?
Yeah, I would just, reiterate the same thing. It's a very dynamic environment that, if you're, for an instance, if you're doing some asphalt paving airside and you're, potentially impacting a taxiway or something. So there's going to be time constraints on when that work can occur, making sure that you have the right closures, and then you got to have the right escorting included. Like, as a subcontractor, as you're placing the asphalt, are you escorting the asphalt trucks coming in and out of the gate, or is that handled by the general contractor? So all those details really got to be ironed out and understood. The other thing is certainly there's moratorium dates that come into play as far as schedule and coordination with airport work. And so depending on your scope of work, some of your scopes may not be able to be performed during the peak seasons, such as Thanksgiving, Christmas, and those times of year. So all those things really come into it. And I guess again, what I would ask and what I look for is the acknowledgement of that included into your bid. So really, being mute on the topic is not a good enough answer. And so it's got to be, acknowledging and specifying really what is included that helps us get to a feeling of having a complete scope. So the more information that can be provided again, and not to say that I'm looking for a lot of exclusions, because that becomes difficult for us as well. But the more that you can explain how you approached and looked at the work and what you included, certainly helps us make that assessment.
That's good food for thought for sure. So it seems like there has to be a little bit of fluidity sometimes with those schedules, but for the most part, I would say that you guys are pretty scheduled out for that kind of work when it comes to taxiways and things like that, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
So are there, I know working in the ADOT world, we have subcontractor forms and things like that. And I know that they're required with federal aid work, but I'm not aware if they are required for like City of Phoenix, the FAA work and things like that. Are those types of contracts that you see at ADOT that include the EEOC information and the 1273 and all of that? Are those required for the aviation work as well once you become a subcontract for one of you all as primes? Eric?
I can jump on that. They don't have an SRF process such as ADOT does, and that requirement prior to coming on site. But the contracts have to have all the flow down language for the federal language specifically, and that has to be submitted prior to them coming on site. A little managed a little differently, I should suppose, but than the ADOT work, but it is very similar in that language does have to be included and a part of it. So it's just managed differently from how ADOT looks at it. But again, it's very important that flow down language and those things are incorporated. And then we upload our contracts to B2G now for the reporting of the payments.
So do you want to, that's a kind of an industry term, probably, Jeremiah, but Eric, you want to explain some of the things that are in the flow down documents that they should when they're looking at that documentation, what they need to look for and what they need to read through, because they will be required to adhere to those same requirements that you are.
Correct, and all of our contracts basically reference back to the owner's contract with us, which includes requirements for as you mentioned, the EEO, and then back to all the federal guidelines. There's also requirements depending on the project of submitting daily logs from their superintendents, from their field personnel, and like I said, that could be project specific, and things of that nature.
Are you all using electronic software out on your projects for data collection and things like that, or is it on tablets? And do you find that subcontractors, do you provide those, or how does that work when it comes to data collection out on the project?
Yeah, we typically, we do have some software that we use. And again, we have a contract specialist on board that will work with you on that. The biggest thing is getting stuff in a timely manner, on a monthly basis, your pay application, for example, getting that in on time, making sure you understand what's required in that pay app. So it's all, because we want to get you paid as quickly and timely as we can, but it all has to be correct in order for us to do that. So step one is get it in on time and making sure it's complete. And it may take one or two pay apps to make sure everybody understands that, but those are some of the things we try to cover with these subcontractors early on. So we make sure, because certified payroll on a federal job is big, right? We got to ensure everybody's getting paid, and it's documented. So those are some of the things we look at, and we help with them.
Great. Rosemary, you work between both horizontal and vertical work. What type of data collection are you all used to using and requesting the subs to use or utilize?
I do think that a lot of what we do is driven by requirements from the owner and the funding source. But in general, we do want to keep track of everybody on site, their hours that they worked, who they are, the EEO requirements we track in general on all of our projects, whether we report it for that particular project or not. I think we provide an outline of what we were requiring and get a good understanding of who's administrating that and how it's going to be delivered. Typically, we'll have a person that will be communicating with the administrative offices of the small business, understanding that many of those people are wearing multiple hats. So, hi.
You've had a little visitor here. That was my boss, David Martin, the president of AGC. So he came to say hello. So it's always good we have drop-bys here at AGC.
Yeah, it is. So I think that we're very careful to provide guidance and assistance where needed, because we know that somebody is maybe wearing several hats, and by the end of the project, we're interested in building capacity and making sure that all your boxes are checked. And somebody was talking earlier about their pay applications being early and clear and concise, done correctly so that they do get paid quickly. And we work diligently with those administrators that are providing that to make sure that the second one is much easier, right?
Yes, that is very, very important, because your paperwork impacts the prime's paperwork, as they discussed, and it could be sent back, which means that starts the time clock again, and it could be another delay. And you might think it's, well, the contractor's fault, but it could be that we didn't have, the documentation was not in the order that the owner needed it, and so it gets sent back. And then the contractor has to run down you as the sub, get it corrected, resubmit, and then there's more time. So it delays your payments for sure, which is something that none of us want to do. Let's talk about some things like how change orders and force account work may impact how a sub gets paid. Let's say an owner decides to give you an extra piece of work or scope of work or change your contract, and it requires you finding a sub to assist you with some of that work. You want to talk about how sometimes that payment may be near the end of the project instead of during the project, and so the expectation for that might be a little different. Anybody want to address that? Oh,
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Jeremiah
Yeah,
does.
Yeah.
this is my favorite topic. No, it's certainly it's a challenge, and I think the early communication of that challenge and help that we can get the backup and things we need to be able to substantiate the value of the change and support getting that submitted is certainly important. But yeah, with the pay when paid and those kind of clauses, it is a challenge that ultimately the direction to proceed with the work is there, and that certainly we got to chase it as quickly as possible. And really, we find is, and we try to assist with this as best we can, is that a lot of times the information provided is not sufficient to substantiate that cost, and so there's an iterative process that takes a while just to get through our own internal reviews before it even gets submitted to the client. So having that and being, kind of Johnny on the spot with that will certainly help in getting you reimbursed for that change as well. And we're here to support and make everybody successful. That's certainly a goal of ours, just to say that. But certainly we got to also make sure that we're compliant with the city's requirements and making sure everything is complete and also passes, really the sniff test and making sure that everything has proper backup. So that can be the challenge that ultimately ends up in, unfortunately, payment for some of those changes occurring later.
Eric, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I would say documentation and early notification as soon as possible is the biggest thing. We're going through some of them now, and it's, you might be going back several months and if the documentation is good, that aids in the ability to basically get things processed.
Yeah. So being detail oriented when you're soliciting work from a prime contractor, it certainly will make you stand out as well, correct? Understanding specifications, and speaking of that, there are a plethora of different specifications depending on the type of work that you're doing. So you need to familiarize yourself with MAG. Maricopa Association of Governments has a set of standards. The city of Phoenix themselves has their own set of standards. FAA has a set of standards. So many different things that you may be directed to when it comes to building your work. Terry, you want to talk a little bit about that, the specifications, and sometimes they can even conflict with one another?
No, absolutely. You mentioned the three that we typically see out there. Having a good understanding, especially depending on what your scope of work, you should know that better than hopefully the prime or the owner. You're specifically looking at your type of work, whether it's underground utilities or asphalt or concrete. Make sure you understand, and if you see a conflict between, if it calls out, whether it's MAG, City of Phoenix, FAA, if you see a discrepancy, bring it to somebody's attention before so we can make sure we can get that cleared up, because I guarantee you there could be. There's usually also an order of a preference of how you're supposed to follow in these specifications. That's usually outlined in the specs as well. So be smart about your scope of work, do your homework, understand what you're building. And again, if you find something that doesn't smell right or look right, bring it to somebody's attention so we can take care of it before we get ourselves into trouble.
I think that's a big thing when it comes to standing out, right, as a subcontractor, is that you're willing to tell the general contractor that the design that you are looking at, or some of those requirements on the project, aren't really buildable that way. And that gives you a great dialogue, right, with you all as a prime to Let them know you do know that scope of work and that you have recognized that there could be a problem for the contractor and then you if you were building it. Rosemary, do you have any added information on that to provide?
Yeah, I agree, the early conversation, I think with what Terry was saying, I think it's as early as when you're estimating it, right? So if you can bring that up early, and clarify it, and then understand the chain of, you know, what order of requirement and specifications, FAA is first, MAG is second, or however that's going to understand that. I think the GC will understand that portion and be able to answer your questions. But when you bring something very specific that you see as unbuildable or is an issue, it should be way before construction, but when you're bidding it, that gives us confidence that you've read it when you're bidding it.
I want to talk about out there at the airport about, I noticed something that Jeremiah brought up that Eric, you probably agreed to as well, is that the city expectations of the work zone are cleanliness and orderly and controlled. So you can't be unorganized and think you're going to rush right out. You're late for when your start time is for your project and get on the site and get working. And I'm going to ask each of you to comment after that, Eric, about safety and warranties and, you know, how important those are to the owner and to you all as a contractor. So let's start with cleanliness and the work zone, Eric, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, especially airside, in an airside environment, you know, housekeeping is huge. First of all, just so your people aren't tripping over things or having any kind of safety concerns, but also aircraft, preventing FOD from you know, going into an aircraft engine is huge. And if you're working on a taxiway, you might only be working in that area for a very limited shift and getting off and opening it back up that morning. So you may have to get in, do work, and then get out that same, all in one evening, let's say. And it has to be as if you were never there.
So seamless setup, take down, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Jeremiah?
Yeah, agreed. And I think another key thing to be clear on is who is covering some of the more general things to the site, such as the sweeping and that. So, you know, sometimes we approach that as we'll cover that work for a subcontractor, or may look at it the other way if it's more of a standalone scope. So, again, something to be very clear on, specifically on an airside piece, is that who's covering some of the could be more general things, and then obviously your own work areas, being responsible for that, making sure that it's cleanly, like we said.
Rosemary, you started off the conversation earlier about EMR. You want to explain an EMR very quickly in the sense of, you know, what that acronym means and then why that's important to Hensel and why safety is important to Hensel out on their projects?
So that's a common safety rating, and I want somebody to help me with that. Earned. What is that? EMR.
It's
Terry, can you tell me?
oh, we all just
Jeremiah, somebody help me.
It's a modification rate. It's a way
Yeah.
to measure it
Is it earned modification rate?
I think that's it.
based off of
EMR,
200,000
are we all
man
like,
hours.
we just know it as EMR? Okay, so it is a safety rating that is identified through, you know, over years and within a year of your work. But it goes back and it captures your safety rating, you know, for the past 7 years. So I think having a low number is what we would like to see on that rate. So it encapsulates your safety performance on all your projects year after year.
And often it's part of your qualifications requirement for you to show what your EMR rate is. And probably the same with your subcontractors, right, Terry?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, that, as you said earlier, as far as the qualifications, I think all three contractors you have here today, including the client or the owner, it's a big part of working out of Sky Harbor is having, you know, safe subcontractors, safe prime contractors, good EMRs, because we all got to remember most of the work that's procured at Sky Harbor is CMAR, and it's based off qualifications. And if you don't perform, you're probably not going to come back. So having that good safety record is very, very important in order to get more work and then continue working out Sky Harbor.
And there are many ways in which you can get assistance with some of that. Jeremiah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I guess just to pile on a couple things, what Terry just said, I think is a critical thing is really if you perform in your current work and the ability to get that in the future. But ultimately how we view subcontractors and those on our side is we want to partner and again, make everybody successful. So we certainly are in everybody's, may seem like we're in everybody's business, but that's kind of the role of the prime and making sure that the job site in itself is handled. So, as there are issues, we'll address them and what we're there to do is help look for betterments and improvements that we can all work together to be successful on. So if that answered your question.
Sure. Do you all have weekly group safety meetings or morning safety meetings, even for the subcontractors? Are they included? Or is that just your group crew that are out there working at Sky Harbor? Or do you have safety trainings for the entire project team?
Yeah, I guess just to speak for us, it's varied kind of by project and the requirements or the circumstances. As a general statement, we always have a monthly safety meeting. We also require weekly toolbox meetings be submitted, and as a part of the program, we'll do management tours. So there's a lot of different programmatic elements of it, but we'll also tailor each project to the specific needs or the concerns. And so certainly if there's an airside piece, there could be a larger focus on that and some different timing. The speed of the job is another huge thing. If it's a lot of different entities working in one area in a quick, fast-paced environment, we'll likely have even daily meetings to coordinate that type of work. So kind of depends on the project needs.
So I'd like to comment on what Jeremiah said about having more meetings more often and how that can take away from your ability to perform work. But I think what Jeremiah is saying, when it's very busy, having the meeting and communicating with the entire team that's in that confined space makes your work go smoother. So it's worth the investment of making sure that your teams are attending all of these meetings that are critical for the success of your project at the end. You'll be better for it. It's a lot of upfront time that will pay off in the end.
That's a really good point, Rosemary. A really good point. I'm trying to look and see some of the things that we might not have covered. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to offer? I've got here's one that I asked a question of. So I'm going to start with you, Eric. What is your pet peeve that you've seen some subs not address that you'd like to see addressed when you're either selecting them or something that might happen out on a project?
I would say not being familiar with the project specifications. Things like, it's a night project and you get a comment of, oh, we weren't planning on working at night. The whole project's at night. And we have seen that, and we've also seen people exclude that, which just basically, disqualifies them unless we're able to get a hold of them and get them to change it.
Good point. Terry, what's your pet peeve?
I would say a sub that comes to the table and has a lot of exclusions, and it's stuff that's basically should fall under their scope. And people that do that got to realize that the prime, if you exclude items that should fit into your scope of work, we then have to put a value towards that to make a comparison to your competition. And if you want us to do that, we can, but it may or may not make you a higher bidder or a lower bidder. So it's in your best interest, if it's the standard stuff within your scope, put a price to it so we can make a good comparison to your competition.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. Jeremiah?
Yeah, I just pile on what Eric said. I think again, if we get proposals and things, that'll be the price for a scope, and the scope is very short and brief and doesn't talk about any of the different accommodations. And then you get into construction, if they were selected, and you start to have conversations about, well, I didn't have that equipment, or I didn't look at it that way, I didn't have such a thing, and then the requests for additional compensation start happening. And really that's a frustration of really kind of the impetus of why we really need to have detail. And that's probably the third time I've said it. So, but need to have detail in our understanding on that bidding, at the bidding phase, of really what your scope looks like. And then really, I'd like to get that in the agreement so that we can agree upon it in a contractual sense. And then there's really not much to argue when everything's spelled out. And if we do ask you to do something additional that wasn't proposed, then certainly you're due that compensation and that change. But having a somewhat vanilla or blank slate on the kind of what could be interpreted as included or not is dangerous for everybody.
Rosemary, how about your pet peeve?
Well, I think once you're on the job and you've had all of those meetings that are clarifying your scope and the schedule, and we've set expectations and you've agreed to everything, and then there's something that you're struggling with, especially if you're small and new and you really want to, be successful on this, because this project is going to add to your portfolio of projects that's going to help you be qualified for the next one. Don't hold back, have the hard conversations, ask for help, because the larger general contractors on these large projects that are really looking for you, everybody here that is talking with you wants to work with you and wants you to be successful. So if there's an issue, don't let it balloon and then become larger than it should have. Let's address it early on. And I think open communication is an answer to a lot of situations to make it easier in the long run and make it successful for everybody.
So I have one question for you in reading through your resume again about assessing capabilities, and it's probably tough and you probably don't like to do it, but are there times when you're assessing the capabilities of what your sub has said that they can do out on work, and you just have to tell them, no, we don't think your scope, that you can perform that scope of the work, maybe a different piece of it as you've read through their stuff, but that's definitely probably a tough conversation to have, but I guess one you have to have, right?
Well, it could be as in-depth as, how many vehicles do you have? How much staff do you have? And what other work are you committed to right now, or when we're going to work? And I think that as in my particular position, that I will be a liaison to the estimating and the project team to see if there isn't a smaller scope that we can get them involved in, that we know they can be successful in. Because I can't think of anything worse than trying to do a job that you aren't able to do well, but knowing that you could have done something else, part of it better. We're interested in your growth. That's why we're here. So yes, it's conversation with the project manager, the project team, is how we can break scope up, but it definitely should be on the table. And part of that is us being able to understand your capacity today and when the project starts.
Great information. We started off and went pretty fast out of the gate, so I want to back up just a little bit. And I know that some of this was discussed yesterday a little bit on, finding about the work, finding out about the work, and how to solicit primes and things like that. And, I for the audience, I think it would be interesting for them to know how far range you all look out for your projects and start analyzing and determining whether it's a go, no go, and whether, then from there, what your next steps are. Eric, how far range, how far out in range do you all look on projects that are going to be, let's say, put out by the City of Phoenix Aviation? We saw some of their timelines yesterday and for their dollar values, but start with where you all start trying to dig up that information if it's not like at one of these expos. How do you do that?
We try and look at the capital improvement programs and talk with designers that we know and that we work with on what they may be chasing, to try and find out what's coming up down the road, even a couple years out. That's how we try and get ahead of them.
Good, Terry?
Yeah, I tell you, we spend a lot of time at that as far as looking ahead. Again, with all the different owners that we're involved with, we try to develop these relationships, try to communicate with these people way in advance. We try to understand what procurement they're chasing, because that has a lot of things to do with how much time we need to spend. An example is CMAR. CMAR is a procurement where you got to spend a lot of time up front trying to understand what the job entails, what the scope is, who the stakeholders are, because you got to remember, for us to win that job, we have to write a proposal to the owner to hopefully convince them that we're the contractor of choice here. So you got to spend a lot of time way in advance before that thing even comes out. Hard bid, on the other hand, a little bit different story, right? It's a set of drawings and specs that you receive on a certain date. You got a certain time period to take a look at it, solicit with your subs, get the numbers in, and you have to submit it on this exact date. So depending on the procurement, it's kind of in one of those drivers of how much time you need to spend in advance trying to understand the jobs.
So quick response, but then long-term planning for alternative project delivery. Rosemary, what about Hensel Phelps? Do they start even 4, 5, 6 years,
That's pretty far out. We think that we are building relationships that far out, anticipating growth in certain areas for, definitely, but for a particular project and building those relationships, I don't know. It's 5 or 6 years is pretty far. When we're talking about procurement methods, a design build project is much longer procurement. And it's important to understand that project early on and who's looking at it. So before it even comes out, to understand it's coming out as design build, and for small businesses to be known to the larger subcontractors that will be able to use them, because then it'll be tiered if it's a very large project. Does that answer your question?
Sure. I was thinking of just your long range of potential commitments for projects that you might, like we saw yesterday. I think some of them were 2 and 3 years out for what might be coming as far as funding for the city of Phoenix. So I know you're looking and trying to determine those early scopes and those early thoughts on what would set you apart. Again, it's about setting yourself apart, right?
Yeah,
To the owner.
I don't think we're anticipating as far as 7 years out, but definitely 3. We're trying to manage our staff to have staff available for projects that we think are coming up. And I think that you have to do that on large projects to be able to say, yeah, we can manage that project and the next one. And then our pipeline is pretty long because the projects that we do are very long.
So outside of, we have the Aviation Summit that started yesterday and provides great information for not only you all, but subcontractors as well when it comes to the work that's, is coming down in the future. The expos, you all will often have booths and people will come up and network you and talk to you about their services. But outside of the expos that cities put on, what other avenues are there for people to solicit their business to you all as prime contractors? And Jeremiah, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Eric and then Terry.
Yeah, one of the platforms we use, and this is kind of how we communicate with our subs and have a database from past solicitations or successful contracts, is Building Connected. So it's a website. I believe you can self-register as a subcontractor and identify the different scopes of work, your certifications, and some general information about your firm. So that's kind of one of the starting points that will, if we're putting out projects, that kind of information is kind of again the starting point of where we can start to build that list that we'll be soliciting to then lead into the rest of the process we've been talking about with qualifications and then ultimately the bidding. But Building Connected is a good tool that helps us to narrow down the different scopes of work. And a lot of times what we'll do is once we get that site for a project up, is we'll send out the notifications, and then in that link we'll also then provide RFQs for the different scopes of work that we're looking for. So those detailed RFQs again are trying to establish really the kind of the rules of the project and what we're looking for in our bid that then can be responded to through Building Connected back to us for our analysis.
Eric, what are some ways that a sub can get to know you or meet you outside of the typical expos or even, online? What are there other avenues?
Well, that's actually our big one is our website. So we have a subcontractor portal where the subs can sign up and they enter their information on there, which gets that to our estimating team. And then also that's where we put out the projects that we're bidding and where they can basically download their scopes of work, their plans and specifications, and the information on how to submit the bid to us for those projects.
Terry, tell me how important then it is, if they're filling that out, that they include the NAICS codes that they're assigned under and certified in, correct?
Well, absolutely. That's important because when we want to send out an RFQ, we need to know if it's concrete related. We are able to go in there and pick up that code, and anybody registered to that, we can then forward that information to them. So it's very important that you fill out that completely and use those codes properly. The other thing we can throw out here at Kiewit too is we have Denise Ozier, who's our contract specialist, is another tool or individual you can contact to help, walk you through our processes as well.
Great. Rosemary, how about Hensel? Where can they meet you? I know you're out everywhere.
I think I'm more like a Denise. I'm more of a liaison, but we use Building Connected. So if you perform a specific scope of work and you want to bid on that, you should get into our system through our website. I can help you with that. And then you will be invited. But on many large projects where we're actually looking for your participation as a small disadvantaged business, we will do extra outreach. So I do a lot of research through certified organizations, City of Phoenix's lists, ADOT's lists, SBA lists. I do search by NAICS code. And then you could be invited to a bid without already being in our system through that or an outreach event. If you perform a scope of work that isn't necessarily bid, but is performed as a general course of work on a site, that's a little bit more difficult for me to get you connected to the right person. So if you attend, for instance, there's a joint subcontractor and the AMCA fair, job or business fair, where we'll have tables and invite people to come and meet all the different contractors that are there. Those are great opportunities. They're not necessarily hosted by ADOT or the City of Phoenix, but the large contractors are there for you to meet if you sign up and attend. So I think those are great opportunities. At those, you'll also meet project managers and estimators and other people that have boots on the ground that can connect you to the right person for the particular service that you provide. So you have to be out there too. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is work. You're right. You absolutely have to put some work in. You have to be willing to go to some of the pre-bid meetings like they talked about yesterday, just like the primes do, to learn more about the project. You need to be, once you're selected, probably going to some of the pre-construction meetings so that you understand how they're going to build that work as well. Every little bit helps you, I think, with this. AGC has an opportunity with the DOT right now where we have up to 5 subcontractors come during that bi-monthly meeting, and they can pitch their services to the entire construction community that attends. And then normally their services are sent over to the contractor members that are in attendance so that there is some idea of who they listen to today and what services they might have that are available. We are looking, Kent's listening, I know now in on this, that we've had discussions about AGC has a joint co-op with the city of Phoenix and the potential of having some 2 or 3 small businesses each time we hold that meeting, which is quarterly, so that they have that opportunity. As a former chairman of the Small Business Oversight Committee, you're invited to attend that meeting, and there is time for the audience to ask a question if they want that's outside the agenda, and then we can answer that at a later date for you. But we have lots of opportunities, and the city of Phoenix does with their SBE office and with Kent, in order to help you find those opportunities that you're looking for. But again, those are not overnight fixes. You have to put in some work. You can't expect to just throw an estimation through the electronic portal of one of these contractors and expect that they're going to look at your quote and consider you for that project. I see that I'm going to start with some final closing comments, and then I've got several questions here that we're going to go to. But Terry, close us out. Give us a little rundown on what you think the biggest important things are. I think we talked about a lot of them, but you want to reinforce some of them today when it comes to being a sub and soliciting with a prime?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I think a lot of, you heard a lot of people on talk about safety. I think that's all 3 contractors that are on here today. That's very important. The second thing we haven't talked a lot about, but it's kind of connected to performance, is quality. Again, you have to do quality work out there at the airport or wherever you're working, especially in a qualification-based environment, right? If you want to be invited back. Make sure you understand the specs, the insurance requirements, the bonding requirements. Be careful on your inclusions and exclusions. Again, communicate early and often. And if you got any questions, feel free to call, anybody here today or anybody of their companies to make sure you understand exactly what you're pursuing.
That's a great list of things to be mindful of. Any of the rest of you, Eric, Jeremiah, Rosemary, want to include something?
I would second with know the contract documents and the aviation specs for your work. That's huge. Look at the project details. Know what's required.
Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think communication kind of wraps up a lot of what we've just discussed, is having that open line of communication, whether it's about issues or about concerns or about, things that are going well. It's good to communicate, really, just, to show your engagement, and then also just to, show that you're all over it. And, if there are issues, it's okay to communicate. It's okay to say you don't have the answer to it, but here's what's going on and we're working on it. So all those types of things are important for us to help everybody be successful.
Rosemary, I'll let you close that out.
So yeah, I think being open and raising those concerns that you're having, and being honest about it. But on the other side of that, you're professionals, you do what you do and you know what you know, but be open to suggestions that come your way from the GCs. They're wanting to help you improve.
Good
So
point.
be open to it.
Very good point. Very good point. With that, I think that our session is almost over. We are going to open it up to question and answers, and I'm going to see if I can scroll down. Nope. Sarah, can you help me a little bit so I can look at all these questions? And any others that may want to be listed, put them in the chat box.
Hi, Amanda.
Hey,
I have
welcome.
entered a few questions in the chat box. If you have trouble seeing them, I can read them to you.
Why don't you start with them? Because I am having a little difficulty there, and we'll start with the first one and see if they can answer it.
All right, the first question, is there a specific list compiled for potential HVAC bidders?
Rosemary, you do vertical work a lot. Do you have any answers on that one?
I'm not familiar with a specific list for, I mean, it's per project. So I think you just need to not come in with your pre-checked off list, but to review and understand the plans that are given to that you're bidding. Unless I'm not understanding that question correctly.
Well, I'm a little confused by it a little bit myself, but there are different mechanisms, say for instance, within the state of Arizona, not ADOT, I think it's in the ADOA system, where you can go in and set up a profile, and you can mark your specialties of work, and then that type of work will be sent to you as a potential advertisement for you to respond. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I just can't think of the name of the website. Is it
Procure AZ.
Procure AZ? Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I would suggest any of you that are not in Procure AZ to go ahead and do that. That would get, and then check off the type of services that you are interested in performing. There may be other areas like that. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, the next question. I am a certified DBE SBE company. My company does custodial cleaning, sanitizing, also final cleans. How do I find out if there's a need for the custodial work, and how do I get a clear scope of work for final cleans? Sometimes they are not very clear.
Who wants to take that?
Okay, well, I can take it. Finding that person, I think that's exactly what I was trying to communicate, is that's not always a scope that's open for a bidding in the early process of the project, at least for Hensel Phelps. We put a number to it, and then the superintendent on the project will find that, or the project manager together, they'll work on finding that company, and they will ask for bids, clarifying the scope. I think you need to be clear on what, the hours that you're putting in or something like that. If you need to make it so that if they're not clear, that you have something to bill to. And I don't know how to tell you that except for to have more conversations and say that this isn't clear. So if it takes X hours, this is what we're going to bill you.
And there are many services sometimes like that that don't come till near the end of a project, correct? I mean, Terry and you guys, if you all will take the time to solicit some of these primes, they'll remember that, oh, I have a resource now that I can fall back on to get a quote from, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's a little different. I think the different scopes of work, in the heavy civil world, it's a little more defined maybe on some of the kind of the cleanup or the end and the scope throughout. But certainly, making yourself available if there are those types of scopes that are more in closeout phase, that could be helpful.
That are not so much heavy construction, as you would say, right? Not in the building portion, but in the final closeout. Sarah, next question.
All right. You mentioned some fairs earlier. Can you tell us when those are so that we can meet the primes?
Well, I know that ADOT hosts 2 expos a year, and now it looks like the city is hosting the Aviation Summit. Rosemary talked about AMCA putting on a summit.
So
I know. Go
I'm
ahead.
s- I'm scrambling here. There is a joint event with the AMCA, the ASA, the Arizona Subcontractors Association, and the ABA, Arizona Builders Alliance, that they come together once a year to have an expo. And I was trying to find that on my calendar really quick, and I haven't found it.
Yeah,
If you are
typically it's-
not a member of one of those organizations, I recommend that you are. The AMCA, the Associated Minority Contractors of Arizona, supports small business. A lot of their classes and the information they send out is specifically supporting small business, and I would think you should be interested in that organization to join. And then they can share events. Any organization, but you can go to their website without being a member and see what their events are.
Yeah, I would agree. Look up all those construction acronym associations, and you'll find
Sorry.
you'll find those opportunities. ABA represents the commercial contractors. The majority of the commercial contractors are your vertical building. AMCA is general to both horizontal and commercial contracting. And ASA is primarily commercial, but also has some horizontal contractors in it as well. In AGC, we are the heavy civil, industrial, and municipal contractors who do your horizontal infrastructure work. So all of us have opportunities, and I know from where I am, I'm always available. We'll put our information, we'll have Sarah send it out at the end of this. If you want to talk to us or contact us, I've always spoken to folks to try to find resources for them in order to have opportunities. Any other questions, Sarah?
Yeah, so the last one, what's the best way for a small business to connect with primes to offer services as a new sub?
So that's what we went over just a little bit ago, but I don't know if there are any more final thoughts on that. In other words, we were talking outside the expos how they could contact these primes. So I think we covered that a little bit. Is that
Yeah.
the last question?
Most primes will have a site on their website for you to register. And then it feels like a black hole until somebody gets back with you, but as soon as they do, respond.
Yeah, responsiveness is important.
Yeah.
So timing, documentation, responsiveness, being resourceful, being reliable are all performance items that we would encourage you to consider when you're going and soliciting for these projects with these primes. With that, anyone have anything else they'd like to say before we sign off, or let Sarah and Kent take it away again? Well, we want to thank you very much for listening in today. I hope we provided some information for you. Thanks to my friend Patty. She put in the chat box what EMR actually stands for.
Thank you, Patty.
For those of us that had brain fade and couldn't remember, we can throw acronyms around really easily, but sometimes then we're caught on the spot when we have to remember exactly what it meant. So our apologies for that. But anyway, it's been a pleasure. Anytime any of us can help you or be a resource, we will always be available for that. So thank you, Kent. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, City of Phoenix Aviation Department.
Thank you, Amanda. Also want to say thank you to the panel, Terry, Eric, Rosemary, and Jeremiah. Really appreciate your assistance with this. It's been valuable information that I think a lot of the subs out there will be able to grasp and be able to implement within their processes and then trying to bid work out to you all. One of the things I do want to mention to Amanda, I can't say enough for you of you. Thank you too for getting this together. It's always been successful in the past years when I was with ADOT. And again, you just spoke about hitting out the park and you have heavy hitters. Well, everybody home runs every single time. So thank you all. You're on mute, but that's okay. You're on mute, Matt. Amanda, you're on mute.
I just said basically, since there's no spring training right now, we're the baseball acronym for.
Got to substitute it somehow. So one of the things that I know you talked about, and everyone talked about, some different ways to be able to connect with primes. One of the things that I've heard from other DBE firms, SBE firms, is that Roads and Streets has been a good, valuable type of venue to be able to go and network and talk to primes, talk to even peers, and attend some of the sessions as well too. So I want to give a plug for that. That's coming in September. So make a plan to be able to attend that event, because that is or has been valuable to a lot of DBs and SBEs alike. So please look at that.
And Kent, when you talk about that, that brings to mind that folks, marketing costs money, and the folks today, we didn't really address much of that, but you are going to have to put a little budget together to spend some of your dollars to promote yourself, whether that be at Roads and Streets. That is not a inexpensive venture for 3 days with registration and food and beverage and sleeping requirements, So you've got, if there's things you want to pinpoint, you think that will be a benefit to your business, then you really need to set some dollars aside for that so that you can actually be there and do the type of marketing that might help you solicit some of this work and get the work.
Absolutely. Or go the day up, like the very first full day. I think that does help as well too. The other thing the panel talked about, and I think is very important also, are NAICS codes, and making sure that you have the right NAICS codes in the system. I can't explain enough that there have been some firms that haven't had the right NAICS codes or addressing the right types of specialties that they've done, or have had experience in particular types of work categories, but not had it certified or expand upon their services that they've had. So take a look at that. If you're in the system, or go to the system, City of Phoenix, ADOT, or wherever you're certified, take a look at that to make sure that your scope of what you do or provide services is in the system and it is clear. And if you're looking to expand your business, look at coming to the City of Phoenix, contact us, and look at some different ways in how you can add a different NAICS code. So that's important as well too. That will diversify your company as well. Panel, Amanda, Sarah, everybody, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. I'd like to close this out, and hope to see you all real soon.
Thank you all again. Thanks, panelists. I appreciate you taking the time.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Good job, everybody.
Bye. Good job. Thank you all.
Very good job. Thank you all.